For decades, one killer mocked the police, taunted the press, and vanished into the fog of Northern California without ever being caught. He gave himself a name, sent coded messages, and claimed to be killing for sport. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer, one of the most baffling and infuriating unsolved murder cases in American history, and the long, agonizing hunt to identify the man behind the mask. Chapter 1. Blood on the Lakeshore. On the evening of the 20th of December, 1968, two teenagers were parked in a lover's lane near Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. David Faraday was 17 years old, and Betty Lou Jensen was 16. They had been on their first date. Sometime around 11 o'clock that night, they were shot and killed. Betty Lou had been found a short distance from the car, shot 5 times in the back, suggesting she had tried to run. David was shot once in the head at close range beside the car door. There were no witnesses, no obvious motive, and no suspect. 6 months later, on the 4th of July, 1969, the killer struck again. This time, the victims were Darlene Ferrin, 22 years old, and Michael Majow, 19. They were parked at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California, less than 4 miles from the first attack. A man approached their car with a flashlight and a gun and opened fire. Darlene was killed. Michael, despite being shot multiple times, survived by playing dead. A short time after the attack, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. The caller was calm and deliberate. He claimed responsibility for both the Blue Rock Springs shooting and the Lake Herman Road murders 6 months earlier. He gave specific details that had not been released to the public, leaving investigators with no doubt this was their man. And then he hung up. 1 month after that call, 3 letters arrived simultaneously, one each to the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. The letters were strange, menacing, and written in an odd mix of block capitals and cursive. Each contained 1/3 of a 408-symbol cipher. The writer claimed that when the full cipher was decoded, it would reveal his identity, and he demanded the newspapers print the ciphers on their front pages, or he would go on a killing spree over the weekend. The newspapers complied, and the cipher was cracked within a week, not by the FBI or any government agency, but by a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty, working at their kitchen table in Salinas. The decoded message was chilling. It spoke of collecting slaves for the afterlife, of killing being more thrilling than hunting, but it did not reveal a name. The writer had lied. And a month later, another letter arrived, this one signed with a crossed circle symbol. The writer called himself the Zodiac. Chapter 2. The Face Nobody Could Forget. On the 27th of September, 1969, the Zodiac attacked again, this time at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking on the shore when a hooded figure approached wearing a bib-like emblem of a crossed circle over his chest. He bound them both and stabbed them repeatedly. Cecilia Shepard died 2 days later. Brian Hartnell survived. He was able to describe the attacker's voice as calm, even conversational. Before leaving, the Zodiac wrote on the door of Brian's car with a felt-tip pen the dates of his previous attacks and the word "by knife" to distinguish this one. Less than 2 weeks later, on the 4th of October, the Zodiac shot and killed a San Francisco taxi driver named Paul Stein in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. This time, witnesses saw the killer from a nearby window, a white male in his early to mid-30s, stocky build, wearing glasses. The police were given a description that very nearly matched, but due to a miscommunication in the radio dispatch, officers in the area were told to look for a black male instead. 2 officers who actually came across a white man matching the real description let him go. He was right there. And he walked away. A piece of Paul Stein's bloodstained shirt was later mailed to the Chronicle as proof the Zodiac had committed the murder. The letters kept coming through 1969 and into the early 1970s, sometimes containing new ciphers, sometimes just taunts. One letter threatened to shoot out the tires of a school bus and pick off the children as they escaped. Parents across the Bay Area were terrified. A composite sketch was produced based on witness descriptions from the Stein murder scene. It became one of the most widely circulated images in the country. Thousands of tips flooded in. None of them led anywhere definitive. If you're finding this as gripping as we do, please consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and ringing the notification bell so you never miss an upload. It genuinely helps us keep making content like this. Chapter 3: Letters, Ciphers, and Dead Ends. The investigation spanned multiple counties and multiple agencies, and almost from the beginning it was plagued by poor coordination. Napa, Vallejo, and San Francisco all had pieces of the puzzle, but there was no central body pulling the threads together. Evidence was mishandled. Leads were not followed up. Witnesses were interviewed inconsistently. One of the most significant figures in the hunt was a San Francisco detective named Dave Toschi, who became so synonymous with the Zodiac case that the character of the detective in the 1971 film Dirty Harry was reportedly inspired by him. Toschi was relentless, pouring years of his life into the investigation. He received thousands of letters from the public with suspect names. He followed up on as many as he physically could. In the early 1970s, the Zodiac's letters began to slow down, then stop almost entirely. One of his final confirmed communications came in 1974, a postcard referencing a film called The Exorcist. After that, silence. Whether he had died, moved away, been imprisoned for another crime, or simply stopped, nobody knew. Over the years, investigators compiled a list of suspects that at various points numbered in the hundreds. The most prominent was a man named Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted sex offender from Vallejo who had been investigated as early as 1971. Multiple witnesses said Allen resembled the composite sketch. He had owned a Zodiac brand watch. He had used the phrase "collecting slaves for the afterlife" in conversation with a friend before the murders, the very phrase used in the decoded cipher. He had been placed near the Lake Berryessa area on the day of that attack. But Allen was never charged. When investigators finally obtained a search warrant and examined his home in 1992, they found disturbing materials but nothing conclusively linking him to the murders. Allen died of heart failure in August of that same year, never having been arrested for the Zodiac crimes. DNA testing conducted on the letters in the early 2000s produced a partial profile that did not match Allen. Whether that DNA belonged to the Zodiac or simply to someone who had handled the envelope before sending it remains a point of fierce debate among investigators. Chapter 4: The Cipher That Waited 50 Years. The Zodiac sent multiple ciphers across his years of communication, and not all of them were ever solved. The so-called 340 cipher, named for its 340 characters, defeated cryptographers for over 50 years. Law enforcement and amateur codebreakers alike tried and failed. Computer analysis in the 1990s and 2000s also came up empty. Then in December of 2020, a team of 3 amateur researchers, David Orenchak, a software developer from Virginia, Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian computer programmer, and Sam Blake, an Australian mathematician, announced they had cracked it. Using a specialized algorithm, Van Eyck had developed to test millions of cipher configurations, and cross-referencing them with possible sentence patterns, they found the solution after years of collaborative effort. The decoded message was taunting and theatrical, referring to the Zodiac's delight in the notoriety his name had gained and mentioning that he was not afraid of the gas chamber because he would be reborn. Crucially, it still contained no name. A fourth cipher, known as the 13-character cipher, has never been decoded. It reportedly contains the Zodiac's name, or so he claimed. After more than 50 years, it still hasn't been cracked. In 2007, a retired San Francisco Police Department investigator named Lyndon Lafferty published a book naming a different suspect, a man he referred to by initials only for legal reasons. In 2018, a documentary series and later a full documentary film directed by David Fincher dramatized the investigation, bringing renewed public interest. Every few years, a new suspect is named, a new theory is published, a new genetic genealogy technique is proposed as the potential breakthrough. As of now, the Zodiac case remains officially open. The San Francisco Police Department and several other agencies still list it as an active investigation. The true identity of the man who terrorized the Bay Area at the end of the 1960s has never been confirmed. The Zodiac Killer murdered at least 5 confirmed victims between 1968 and 1969, sent dozens of taunting letters to police and newspapers, and was never identified despite one of the longest and most intensive cold case investigations in American history. With his ciphers remaining unsolved for decades and his identity unknown to this day. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. You can also watch more crime videos like this one by clicking on screen.